Yo, what is good, everybody? It is Tony, and I am back with another video. And in this one, I want to really dive deeper into my experience shooting at Runway 7's New York Fashion Week show. If you watched the previous video on my experience shooting at New York Fashion Week for Runway 7, then this one is going to go a little bit deeper, a lot deeper. I want to break down each individual experience from the beginning to end. So we're talking about badging, casting, fittings, makeup, the shows, and all the little things in between. It's going to be a little lengthy, so sit tight, bear with me, and we're going to get through this together, all right? So the first day was basically getting your credentials and badging and shooting the casting portion of the show. So we waited in line. Once we were in and we scanned our QR codes and whatnot, we got our badges and we went downstairs. That's where we met the rest of the team leads, basically kind of like the OG media folks of Runway 7, and they got us situated, and I was in the middle pit, which I will get into a little later. Basically, we were in the middle pit, and that's where we were situated to shoot the casting portion. Being a house videographer, we had a little more leverage in moving around and being able to, get different aspects, which I really felt was very necessary, especially for these type of shows where if you're right in the middle, it's not a lot of depth. So you want to move around and you want to get different angles, just to tell that story a little bit better. That was one of the perks of being a house videographer, was the fact that, we kind of had a little bit more freedom to move around and get the shots that we needed, because essentially we were shooting for Runway 7. We want to give them the best possible footage. So that was a big perk, and I will talk about those perks a little bit further down. So basically we were handing one of these badges, right? If you were wearing a staff badge, the perks were being able to walk in and out a little more freely, as long as there wasn't like a staff line. You can come in and out as you pleased, which was very beneficial, especially for videographers, because I was in charge of basically going out, getting footage of the lines, getting footage of the city, just overall a lot of texture and a lot of B-roll type footage, alongside, everything else that was going on the inside at the shows. That was like a huge perk. And then being able to just kind of move around the entire Sony hall, with exception to certain places, due to production reasons and just privacy for the models, of course. That was a big leverage that I had in being able to create the kind of videos that I wanted to create. The casting portion of it all was kind of cut and dry. They walked up and down. The way that worked out is the designers and their teams, they would be like on the side pits, which would be later filled by the other media photographers and videographers. They would select their models, and sometimes some models will have to walk again. Once that portion of the show is done, basically they make their selects, and that leads into day 2. The fitting portion was really fun, honestly, because it was a little more involved as far as the designers and the models and just a little bit of the production team. They were organizing and getting things situated and getting the models fitted for the looks that they wanted. And I thought that was really fun, because you kind of get to see, what's the process like behind how these shows actually function. And I thought that was really cool, very awesome experience. And then being able to communicate with the designers and the models and things like that. It was a huge networking situation, because everybody was there, taking photos, shooting video, documenting, and it wasn't just cameras. You have a lot of cell phones out and the different media teams that had their own things going on. It was just a lot happening all at the same time. It was just really fun being around other creatives and just kind of watching the process. There was a point in time where there was too many photographers and videographers, and there was way too many models being fitted out of clothes. The last thing you need is photos and videos of somebody not clothed. So they decided that we needed to thin out the amount of people that were there with cameras. That was a great opportunity for me and a couple of my friends to go out into the city and shoot some other content, you know, get some texture and some city vibes for the video, you know, really help out with the B-roll of what I wanted my video to look like, of what I had in mind. If you watched the last video, you saw what that looked like at the beginning of the video. Yeah, it was just an overall good time, you know, being able to go out into the city and just kind of take a break and decompress a little bit from everything that was going on, because it was just a lot, easily overstimulating for some folks. Stop, grab some coffee, grab some lunch. Obviously, we got some pizza. That was a must do. You know, you can't go to New York and not have pizza. It's just, that'd be criminal. That was a good time. And then later on in the day, it was the makeup, the opening acts, and then the show. For the makeup portion, let me backtrack a little bit. So the fittings were done at another building, and then the makeup was done in the main venue over at the Sony Hall. Basically, they were using one of the pits to do the makeup. And then you can easily see the right corner pit start to get filled up with the green badges, which is like the ones who got, like, I guess, normal media passes and whatnot. So that filled up really fast. I was basically just grabbing footage of, you know, the stage getting prepared and things like that, the makeup and whatnot. And it was just a really good time. Just overall, again, being able to see the process. Mind you, this was my first experience shooting for runway fashion at all in any shape or form. So it was all like brand new, and the novelty of it was really exciting. I thought it was a really great experience. One thing to take note when shooting for runway fashion, and depending on how the layout is of their venue, specifically at Runway 7, they use a Sony Hall. And the Sony Hall, you have your main pit. This is like dead front center of the stage. And then you have like the two side pits, which honestly I thought was better than just shooting in the middle, because like the shots are pretty standard. You're gonna get your shot, you're gonna get your angles right there in the middle. However, you don't get as much depth, in my personal opinion. I thought it was really cool that I was like off to the right and being able to shoot a different angle, because you had like a foreground, then you have the stage where the model's walking, and then you have the background. And essentially it creates a little bit more depth, because you get that crowd, stage, model, and then you have another crowd right behind the stage, which I thought looked really cool. And you get the pan, you know, from the beginning of their walk all the way to the very end of the stage of the runway. And then you kind of get more movement, as opposed to just being dead center. And maybe you can like zoom in, zoom out, but that's about as much as you're gonna get. So I was there shooting for the opening acts, the beginning shows, which was for Rick Ross. That was my first experience shooting a fashion show, and I thought it was really cool. The first shows only lasted from about 7 to about 10:30, 11 o'clock. And then the rest of the shows were pretty much all day for the rest of the week. We'll get into the rest of the shows now. So the rest of the week was broken down into 3 separate shows. So you had a morning, afternoon, and then evening shows. And that pretty much gave you like an hour intermission in between to, you know, kind of get your bearings together. If you're a photographer, then you were probably like editing and trying to get things done and pushed out as fast as you could. The internet wasn't the best. You know, luckily we were able to finesse, you know, the Wi-Fi password. So that was very clutch to get things done, especially for those guys who wanted to get the photos, you know, edited, sent out as fast as possible, because this is one of those name of the games is who gets the photos out first, essentially. For videos, a little bit different, because if you're shooting in log or raw, you know, you have to color grade and you have to edit, chop. It's a lot more work for video as opposed to photography. I was not editing anything until I got home. It was insane, but much props to everybody who was able to push out photos as fast as possible. Steve, you're a machine, bro. Basically, I took that opportunity to kind of walk around and get other footage, and sometimes I would like leave the venue and come back just to shoot other types of video, like, you know, the lines and the outside and what the crowds are looking like, and, you know, the DJs, just overall different aspects in the atmosphere of the event, which I thought was really cool, because it kind of added a little bit more than just runway stuff. Overall, I mean, that's the main focal point, but I wanted to add a little bit more story into my video and the type of footage that they would be able to use, you know, to create their own videos. That's essentially what my ideas and my vision was for how I wanted to create it. I think it turned out really well, honestly, you know, from beginning to end. You know, I was non-stop shooting. Honestly, it was like all day, every day type thing. Even when I was on the plane, if you saw the video, I was getting footage of, the New York City from an aerial view. Next time I might even get a helicopter ride. You never know. The overall experience was really cool. The shows are dope, a lot of different designs, and it's just really crazy to see some of like the fashion that I was experiencing, because there's a lot of stuff you like don't normally see like on a regular day, but especially here in Tampa, because it's very warm climate here. So you're not going to see that type of fashion, which I thought it was very interesting, very unique, and much props to the designers really putting themselves out there like that. We're going to break down the red carpet and backstage. Now, as I mentioned before, I had access to all the different areas, the venue, in order to create the footage and the videos that I wanted to create. So with that being said, I had the opportunity to shoot at the red carpet. The red carpet was a little bit hectic because there was like constant traffic. For video, you're getting a lot of movement while you're trying to get like the subject that's in the backdrop in the red carpet and all that good stuff. And it was just, it was a little chaotic. I'm not even gonna lie. Definitely, if this is your first time shooting at a fashion show or whatever, and there's red carpet, if it's not being controlled, you're gonna get a lot of movement in front of your lens. Definitely be on the lookout for that. That's something to take note of, and just kind of have to work around it. And if you're shooting photo, it's probably a little bit easier because you can get your shot and then just pause, whatever, and then shoot again. With video, you can leave it running, you can hit record and just let it do its thing, and then you have to chop it up in post. But totally up to you. That's your workflow, is your workflow. Whatever works for you, man. If you don't want to miss a shot, just hit record and just let it do its thing. For backstage was a little tricky because it wasn't, I want to say it was a really tight space. However, there's a lot of people, so it made your ability to move around a little more restrictive. So I definitely wish that I had like a 24 or 28 millimeter, because I was shooting on a Tamron 35 to 150. Sometimes that 35 was a little too tight for the kind of shots that I wanted, especially for when the models were returning back to the backstage. I was like right there in front of them, so it was like super up tight and close. So I didn't have a lot of room to move around and kind of get different angles. I was kind of just right there, just hitting record and get the shots that I could. And it provided a different perspective, a little bit more close, a little more intimate. But I definitely wish I had the option to go a little wider. And yeah, that was basically it. The backstage experience was really cool because you get to see the designer and their team, and the whole production team working back there and just doing interviews, the post show and things like that. And it was just like really cool. And then the models getting themselves ready and getting pumped up or whatever they need to do to make that walk, because at the end of the entire event they gave us the opportunity to walk down the runway. And I gotta tell you, it was honestly a little nerve-wracking. Would I do it again? Maybe if they invite me. I'm no runway model, but it was fun. The experience of walking down the runway at the end of the entire show, and everything was pretty much shut down, and it was an after party to kind of just like toast and celebrate to a successful show. And yeah, man, it was overall a really great experience. I have to admit, if I'm invited back, I will definitely go back. Enjoyed every aspect about it, and learning so much about like fashion shows and how things run and operate, and being able to communicate and network with so many different people. Amazing experience. Definitely would do it again. I was looking at like going to London, Paris, Milan for their fashion shows. Maybe sometime down the line, maybe I'll be able to go or get invited, and I would love to be there for it. So that's pretty much everything that I took away from my first experience shooting as a house videographer for New York Fashion Week for Runway 7. Overall, I'd give it an 8 out of 10. Definitely would do it again. If you have any questions, comments, please drop them down below. and I will catch you all on the next one. Peace.